What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the newest episode of the Believe in Oregon podcast. I'm Zachary Neal here after a 41-7 Oregon Ducks blowout win over the Oregon State Beavers. I think we kind of saw it coming. Honestly, I thought it was going to be more of a blowout. I predicted 63-3. Oregon didn't look that explosive. This wasn't, I don't know, it was an interesting game. They had a really slow start. We'll get to that in a second, but I don't know if our expectations were a little bit juiced just because of what we saw in week 1 and week 2 against Montana State and Oklahoma State. I think we can all agree that those teams are not, we didn't ever think they were good. Let's be real. Montana State, good FCS team for sure. Oklahoma State, I think, one of the worst teams in the nation. They just lost to Tulsa last night. So, getting blowouts in those games, they set you up for high expectations. We saw last week against Northwestern, not a perfect game, but we know that Oregon is a good team. I thought that they were going to dominate this game. They did. It was not as explosive as I thought it was going to be, but for the most part, they looked really good. So today I'm going to go through some of my takeaways from this game, just like we do every Saturday night after the games, and then talk a little bit about Penn State coming up. But for starters, let's talk about, last year Dan Lanning talked a lot about the need to see a complete game. That's something that, the third quarter last year was always the bugaboo for Oregon. They couldn't oftentimes they wouldn't even score in the third quarter. We didn't know kind of what was up with this team coming out of halftime. That was one of their biggest weaknesses. That has not been the case for this Oregon team, but so far through these past 2 games, either the start or the end of the game has been a struggle for them. Last week against Northwestern, we saw them give up 14 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, made that 34-14 victory seem a little bit less than what it should have been. Still a dominant win, but not as good as you hoped it would have been. This game, it was the first quarter that they really kind of struggled in. They ended the first quarter tied with Oregon State. It was 7-7. You had a nice offensive drive to start the game. Really nice throw and catch from Dante to DeCorian Moore. Great touchdown for DeCorian, kind of fight for extra yards. But then you give up, I forget how many plays it was. I think it was 12 plays, something like that. I actually have that right here. Let me just check that real quick. Just kidding. I don't have that right here. 13 plays, 64-yard drive to Oregon State in the first quarter for a touchdown to tie it up. You give up 76 yards of offense in that first quarter. After that, they really, the defense kind of woke up and realized who they were playing and said, you know what, no more. So like I said, 76 yards in the first quarter. The defense gave up a total of 71 yards for the rest of the day. So that being said, you want to see better starts because you can't have starts like that against Penn State this next week. We'll get to that later. But they did wake up. They did clamp down and they did start playing well. So you like to see that. The offense was kind of stagnant a little bit in that first quarter as well. But again, they picked it up as well. You had Dante Moore, really good game. Career day, touchdown-wise, at 4 touchdowns. 305 yards. Also ran the ball incredibly well. I think he had 62 yards rushing, which I don't love to see him running that much. We'll talk about this a little bit later too. But, if he needs to run, he can run. I think he's proved that at this point. So going forward, I think we all feel that this Oregon team is really good. We like what they can do for sure. But again, like last year, we need to see a complete game. We need to see them put it together for all four full quarters. Excuse me. Sorry, it's been a long day. And just play a complete game. I think we saw that against Montana State in week 1. We definitely saw it against Oklahoma State in week 2. You should see it against those teams. But as we get to better teams, we should have seen it against Northwestern. We should have seen it against Oregon State too. Those are teams that are of the caliber of talent that you should be able to play for full quarters. That's a really tough thing to say, I'm realizing. A full game and not really struggle with them. So I'm interested to see going forward how they improve. Because like I said, against Penn State, you cannot manage, a bad quarter. You can't have a slow start. You can't have a bad finish, or you're going to lose that game. Plain and simple. You just, Penn State is the number 2 team in the nation. Like you have to play your best footballs to beat them, especially on the road, whiteout environment, college game day going there. Like we'll get to it later, I keep saying, but you need a complete game for sure. Up next, let's talk a little bit about Bryce Betcher. We've been talking about him a lot this week. Obviously, he's the hometown kid. This is his final Civil War, final game against Oregon State. He was the one who, debuted the uniforms for Oregon. He had just such a big hand to play in this game and the lead up to this game. He played like it too. I mean, he came out there and he had 9 tackles in the first half. He only finished with 10 tackles, which was one off of his career high of 11, which he had against Oregon State last year and Washington last year. So obviously he likes rivalry games or just hates his rivals. But it was one of those, I wouldn't say one of those games, but one of those halves where watching him play was just special. I can't wait to rewatch the tape and go back and look, because he was just, I think I wrote it down here. Oregon State had 28 plays in the first half. Bryce had tackles on 9 of them. So it's impressive, for 1/11 of the defense to have that much of an impact on the game. He said afterwards, I asked him about it, like, what does that feel like, just to be kind of in that mode? He said he was just in a flow state. He said it's the best feeling in the world. I mean, he went out and, this game means a lot to him. His teammates said that he was just kind of on a different level this whole week. Like, Dante Moore said that he was bringing the energy all week in practice. So you love to see that from one of your leaders. You love for him to be able to go out on a win against Oregon State. It was just well earned from him. I know this, we'll get to this later in the season when we're closer to senior day, but today was one of those days where it just reminded me, like, I'm going to miss watching Bryce play when he's done here at Oregon. Like, we can talk about this more in depth later in the season, but I have so much fun watching him play, talking to him after games. He's such a genuine guy. Eugene kid, went to the same high school that I did. So, he's really turned into an Oregon fan favorite. It's been really cool to see for a former walk-on to do that. So great game for Bryce. He played really well. I think he will continue to play really well and be the leader of this defense going forward. So love to see that. Sticking on the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about that pass defense. Man, they were really impressive. Coming into the game, Oregon State quarterback Malik Murphy was averaging just under 300 yards per game, had a 61% completion percentage for the year. Oregon did not let him do that. I thought it was like a misprint in the stat sheet after the game when I looked at the final stats. Murphy was 5 for 18 passing. That's 28%. And he had just 68 yards through the air. Like, that's incredible. I mentioned earlier that, they gave up the 71 yards in the first quarter total. They had 147 yards. Where is it? I'm looking at 147 total yards, 80 total passing yards, and then 67 rushing yards. Like, the defense played incredibly well. Outside of that one drive in the first quarter where Oregon State converted 2 3rd and 8s, like they had a good drive. But outside of that, this defense just locked things down. It was forcing a ton of punts. No turnovers, no sacks, but still the defensive line, they got after Murphy and they made him uncomfortable. They made him feel them throughout the game. Thought it was a really impressive game. They came in with a plan, made sure that they weren't going to be able to throw on them, weren't going to be able to run on them. And they executed. It was impressive to see for sure. Excuse me. One other thing that was really impressive for me, or at least I would say just really fun, the fake punt, I think, was really fun with James Ferguson Reynolds. Dan Lanning obviously loves the fake punt, but it was really cool to see after the game, or to hear, I should say, that was not a play that was called. JFR he went back to, it was, I think, 4th and 4 on the 34 for Oregon early in the third quarter. He went back to punt like normal, like they were planning to just give the ball away. and he saw the right side of the defense just open up, and he's like, all right, I'm just going to run for this. And he ran for 21 yards. He had a great quote. Let me read it for you. He said, I just went out there for a normal punt and grabbed the ball and saw a big gap and thought, why not take it? I never run in my life, so that's where the slide came in. I had a little bit of fun out there. I got to be a football player for 5 minutes. James Ferguson Reynolds, I don't know, like he's a Boise State transfer this year, the Australian kicker. So he was a really fun interview. He's just like a jovial guy, a lot of fun to talk to. This is someone at Boise State. I wrote it down here somewhere. In his 3 years at Boise State, he had 161 punts. So far, he has 6 punts this year. So it's probably pretty tough to be the Oregon punter. He's just not getting a lot of use because they're not really punting too much. But I love that when he did get out there, he definitely made the most of it. And hey, he didn't even punt. And then later in the game, too, he actually did have a punt that it looked like one of the weirdest punts I've ever seen. He kind of rolled to the right, Australian kick, rugby style kick, but then just booted a line drive that got maybe 10 yards off the ground, probably closer to 5. And it just hit the ground and like spun and just really sat, and they downed him within the 5-yard line. I thought it was a miss kick, honestly. I was like, wow, that was really lucky. I asked him after the game if that was playing. He said, yeah, that's a kick that I know. The punt returner was up on the other hash, so I kept it low and kind of sent a little drilled one down there and knew that he wasn't going to be able to get it, and it stopped on the 5. So, I mean, I could never do that in a million years if I tried. So for him to be able to do that, really impressive. Oregon, they might not need him very much, but they do have a really good punter when they do need him. One other thing from this game, no Whittington again. I think that, he warmed up for this game. He was in full pads, went through warmups, but just did not play at all. I don't think that's a major surprise. I think he's a little bit dinged up. I'm not sure, what body part is injured for him, but I think they're just resting him, waiting for next week, just making sure that he's full go against Penn State, because that's when you really needed him. Didn't really need him today, and Oregon's backfield did great. They ran for 298 yards on 46 carries, which is 6.1 yards per carry. So they were fine without him. Hopefully he gets rested and recuperated and can get up to full speed by next week, because that's when you really need him. Elsewhere on the injury front, Decorian Moore did play, did start, did have a really good game. 3 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown, had that first touchdown of the game. Also a really, really incredible toe tap catch on the right sideline in the first quarter. He looked really good. I know that he got dinged up in practice earlier this week. There was kind of an injury scare. But obviously he's fine and full go and playing and looks really good. So no need to worry about that part. We mentioned Dante Moore a little bit. I'm not going to go deep into this, but his rushing ability was really incredible today. That was one of our biggest questions this offseason, was whether or not he's going to be able to bring that, that facet of the game to Oregon's offense, like Bo could, like Dylan could. They're really mobile quarterbacks, and up to this point, Dante wasn't, or up until this season. He looked really good so far, and he had, let me see, he had 7 rushes for 62 yards today. I don't think a single one of those 7 rushes was called, like it was a called run or a planned run. I need to go back and watch the film or watch the replay, but he's doing a really good job of surveying the field, and if he doesn't see anything, he's going to take off. If he sees space in front of him, he's gonna take it. So there's a couple times today where it seems like once a game he manages to get hit in the head somehow or take a hard hit. You would like to see a lot less of that, but I do love the fact that he is able to run and get out there and pick up some yards with the legs. That's something you really need to see from your quarterback, especially in Oregon's offense. All right, let's look ahead to Penn State a little bit. A lot has been made this past week about the fact that Penn State has a bye week while Oregon played Oregon State. You could think of that as a good thing for Oregon or a bad thing for Oregon. I mean, obviously, giving Penn State an extra week to prepare and get healthy is something valuable for sure. It's not hard to argue that point. I also think that it could be a benefit for Oregon because there's not going to be any rust, coming in. Oregon knows what that rust is like from a bye or 3 weeks off before a Rose Bowl, maybe. Penn State has also played nobody this year. I forget the people they've played. I think Nevada, Villanova, and FIU off the top of my head. I may be wrong on that. I probably am wrong on that. They've played nobody, and now they have a week off, and then they're going to come in and have someone as good as Oregon come in next week. So, that's kind of your perspective on whether the bye was good or not. But Dan was asked after the game, when they're going to, flip the switch and start looking at Penn State, how long they're going to enjoy this Oregon State victory. He said, the switch has been flipped. I always get that saying wrong. So they're really excited. They're already looking forward. It got announced during the post-game press conferences that GameDay is coming to Oregon, or going to Penn State for the Oregon game. So that will be very fun to see. That'll be, I think, the 32nd time Oregon has been featured on College GameDay, which is cool. It'll be strange to not have Lee Corso there for sure. But it'll be a cool experience. I'll be out there in Penn State. That'll be a lot of fun. I can't wait to preview that one. A whiteout game at Beaver Stadium. That's a bucket list thing. I'm incredibly excited to get out there and be able to watch that game, and just hopefully it's a really good game. I'm hopeful. They're two teams that we don't know a lot about yet. I think we both know they're good. We know they're both talented. We know they're both well coached, but how they stand up against another really good team, we'll see. That's not something we've seen yet. I think that's about it. One thing I want to note, and I'll talk to Jay Stu about this later too, because we're talking about the Indiana and Illinois game. I'm trying to remember, was it Illinois that he was really out on, or was it Indiana? I think it was Illinois, and he's being proved right so far, because Indiana, it's on commercial right now, but last I saw was up 63-10. Excuse me. Just complete blowout. And you'll know that after Oregon has Penn State, they've got a bye week, and then Indiana comes to Eugene. That should be a very, very, very entertaining game. I put this on Twitter, potential for College GameDay to return or to come to Eugene for that game. There's some other big games, most notably the Red River rivalry between Oklahoma and Texas, which likely will get GameDay because, Oklahoma is going to be a top 10 team. Texas is probably going to be a top 10 team. I think they're 8 right now, and they're blowing out Sam Houston, whoever. So they'll probably get it, but I bet Big Ten kickoff or Big Noon Saturday, whatever, is in Eugene for that game. Should be a really good one. So it's funny, we've spent the whole year kind of looking forward to Penn State and kind of waiting for this game. And now that Penn State's here, I'm sitting here going, I'm looking forward to that Indiana game and looking ahead. So Penn State first, that's what matters right now. But just know that, after that bye week, that's going to be an important bye week, because then you got the Hoosiers coming to town after that. It should be a really fun game. I am excited for that one for sure. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. You can check out more of my work at duckswire.usatoday.com. Follow me at Zachary C. Neal on Twitter. I'll be back on early this next week with my guy Jay Stu to break down everything and look ahead to next week's game. All right, until then, take it easy.